Welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here, another great show for you today. We're going to start things off with Marc Andreyko, because his IDW Love is Love anthology comes out next week. It is a wonderful tribute to the memories of the Orlando shooting casualties and survivors and extended families. I mean, that incident really screwed up a lot of people's lives and cost a lot of people's lives. And Marc did something positive. He got the comics community behind him and has come up with this incredible anthology. It's a pleasure to talk to him about this book on part one of Word Balloon. Then we welcome back Ryan Browne. It's great to hear Ryan back. I went to 4 Star Studios live and had literally a sit-down conversation with Ryan on their couch. And we just talked about a few things, among them his new Image book coming out in January, Curse Words, with Charles Soule. We talked to Charles about that a couple of weeks ago, but also check in on God Hates Astronauts. And as always with Ryan, kind of address that creator-owned, self-published comics world, doing it through Kickstarter, doing it through Image, the various avenues that Ryan has found success, and his observations. I think he's one of the guys who's really cracked the code on how to publish creator-owned comics. You know, Ryan wasn't a really big name, but he made his name around the comics community and has been able to become a professional cartoonist without ever having to go to DC and Marvel. And I think he has a great story, and I'm glad that he always shares it with us and has new insight each time we talk. So enjoy that portion of the conversation. Ryan Browne, and in part 2 of Word Balloon. Guess what? No sponsor today, and the reason why is I really hope you get behind Love is Love, because all the proceeds go to the families and survivors of the Orlando shooting and extended friends if they didn't have family. I think it's a really good cause, and the book is only $9.99. There are digital extras that are not in the published book, and it comes out next Wednesday, the 28th. And I just think it deserves your time and attention. So why don't you contribute to the cause? You'll hear the list of creators. Marc and I go through it. I want to point out, because Marc is writing really one of my favorite DC books right now, and that's The Death of Hawkman, which is a new spin on the Thanagarian Ron conflict, and it stars Adam Strange in Hawkman. I think the book is great, and we did talk about it, but unfortunately my old laptop, I was still using it and hadn't bought a new one, which I now have, and it was really screwing up interviews, and it's become a real big problem to the point where I had to buy a new laptop. So what did survive was the first part of my conversation with Marc, and God, we had so many troubles and misstarts with that old laptop that I was glad to get this, clean take, and it's all his talk about Love is Love. So I will have Marc back on in the weeks ahead to talk more about some of the other things he's got brewing, because he's got a cool 2017 lined out for him. So until then, here is Marc Andreyko talking about Love is Love from Image, or from IDW and DC Comics, now on Word Balloon. Happy to welcome Marc Andreyko back to Word Balloon, and not only because I enjoy talking to him, he was one of my original guests going back 11 years ago, but we're going to talk about a few things, but primarily I did want to talk about his new anthology that is coming out in December. It's a joint venture between IDW and DC, and really the whole comics community in response to the tragedy that happened in the summer. But Marc, I will let you explain the book, Love is Love, and what it's all about.
Love is Love came about from the Orlando massacre at the Pulse nightclub in June. I remember waking up the morning after it happened and seeing how many people were killed and how many people were profoundly injured and feeling physically ill. And my instant reaction reflexively was the comics community needs to do something, because, as a child of the 80s of We Are the World and Comic Relief and that sort of thing and Live Aid, when tragedy happens, artists have almost a moral contract to react to it and to create art. And, growing up with things like We Are the World and that sort of thing, it's a way to be a catharsis for the artists creating the work. It's a way for a shared communal outpouring of love for these terrible events. And it's a way to allow people to contribute to help others, but also have something that memorializes them. It would be very easy to just write a check to the Red Cross and kind of compartmentalize and move on from this tragedy, because we live in a world where the news cycle is every 35 seconds, it seems. So it's very much like Finding Dory. Every 30 seconds you have to start over again. And this should hurt. This should be something that makes us sad and makes us ache, and we should remember this. This is not something to move on from. because this was just the latest in a string of these sort of horrible tragedies that are utterly avoidable. And the book is political in the sense that it's about this event, but it's really not political. It's not about, I have my issues with the treatment of the mentally ill in this country and the insane lack of gun laws, but this is about love. This is about everyone should love someone and be loved in return, and don't be threatened by people who are in love, and we should celebrate that. And, all good art in the face of tragedy and oppression is defiant, and there's a really great defiant streak in this about keeping dancing and not hiding. And unfortunately, as a member of the gay community, we have a history of having to deal with this, whether it goes back to Stonewall riots in the late 60s, or the AIDS crisis with ACT UP in the 80s. I was a teenager when people would go into the hospital with a cough and 2 weeks later be dead. The generation of kids now don't realize that millions of lives were lost between 83 and 90 in the mid 90s, and people are dying. So the gay community knows how to galvanize and react when things are bad. And, Matthew Shepard, another prime example. But this event kind of transcended race, gender, politics, and orientation. This hurt everybody because it's just 49 people. I don't know if I could name 49 friends right now. That's an immense amount of people, and 53 people injured, profoundly injured. So this is some of the best people in comics and film and television and novels and literature coming together and contributing 1- and 2-page stories. They can be pinups, they can be essays, they could be stories, they could be autobiographical, they could be Orlando specific, they could be sci-fi. DC and IDW came together on this. IDW is publishing it with assistance from DC. DC allowed us to use their characters. Archie allowed us to use their characters. The Will Eisner estate let us use the Spectre, or not the Spirit. It's been a long day. You can edit that out in post. And in an age of divisiveness, both in the genre community and in the world on the political stage, this is just an outpouring of love and passion and grief and celebration and honoring the people who we lost and, celebrating their memory. And it's an immense book that came together in the past 4.5 months, which would not have been possible without the 2 editors who volunteered their services, Jamie Rich, who's a great writer in his own right and is now the executive editor at Vertigo, and Sarah Gatos, who covers the Star Trek properties and the Hasbro properties and Nickelodeon at IDW, and they both, on top of their busy schedules of editing upwards of 20 pieces, they volunteered the time to help this book come together, and it wouldn't have been possible without them. So that's the long version.
No, and that's amazing. And honestly, before we started recording, you pointed out too, not just the 50 casualties and the injured that total around 50, but their families and the friends that they left behind. And go on. It's overwhelming. There was a story about one guy who was at the club with a bunch of his friends, and he went home because he was feeling sick, and the next morning he found that his friends were all killed. Yeah. There's the story of the woman who survived cancer twice. She's 49 and had 11 kids, and she was at the club with her son, and she stepped between the killer and her son and took the bullet for him and died. Wow. I mean, there are stories that are just, there's just these horrible stories, and stories of people that faced horrible fates and did it, and there's people that were left behind. We forget that after the funerals, there's a whole lifetime that people continue after this isn't in the headlines anymore. Things like there were a couple of elderly people whose primary caregivers were their gay children who were killed in the club, and who's going to take care of them now? Yeah. There are some families that are so financially strapped they couldn't get gravestones for their children. I mean, I can't even fathom that. There are people that are going to need psychiatric aftercare. There are people that are going to need physical aftercare. The 53 people that were shot, the killer used a high-powered rifle. That's not a BB shot or pellets. That's a profound injury, and a lot of these people are going to need altered living spaces and altered ways of life for their wheelchairs or their medicines or their treatments. And that's what this is going to go to. Every single penny is going directly to
Equality Florida, and it's specifically earmarked for the victims of Orlando. Everything on this book was donated, from the creators, the editors, the colorists, the letterers, the printers, the paper, everything. So there's no percentage of this going to charity. This is all going to help. This is going from the reader, the buyer, the purchaser of it, from their hand directly to help victims, and that was really important to me, and that's what happened. And also too, the caliber of people on this book is just insane. If I had a comic book company that employed these people, I would be living on a mountain of gold, because it's some of the biggest, most amazing talents in the business.
Yeah, I've got a list to start, and I know you'll add to it. Brandon Peterson, Damon Lindelof of Lost, Elsa Chartier, Jesus Saiz, Lanil Yu, Matt Wagner, Mike Carey, Phil Jimenez, Olivier Coipel, Patton Oswalt, Paul Jenkins, Steve Sadowski, and I'll let you throw some other names in there that people will recognize immediately.
Sure, Brian Bendis and his daughter Olivia wrote a piece that Mike Oeming drew, Grant Morrison.
Brad Meltzer, I know you told me off the air.
Brad Meltzer, Willow Wilson, Jeff King, Morgan Spurlock, Patty Jenkins, the director of the upcoming Wonder Woman film and the Academy Award-winning film Monster, wrote an introduction that's beautiful. Roberto Aguirre-Sacasa, Stephen Byrne, Brian Buccellato, George Perez, Carl Kiesel.
Who's the white collar guy again?
Matt Bomer, who's lovely. He wrote I mean, it's just crazy, the amount of people that worked on the book. My friend Eddie Gordetsky, who is one of the creators of the sitcom Mom, who has geek cred because he wrote the Christmas with the Joker episode of Batman the Animated Series. He wrote a piece. We have David LaFuente doing art. We have, I mean, it's the list just goes on and on and on. I always feel anxious when I'm talking about this, because there's always people I forget, because we have over 350 creators involved on this.
That's awesome.
And it's just, it's really been spectacular.
No,
and the creators too. We also have people on the book who aren't comics creators. I really reached out to trans people I knew, and people of color, and people that might have stories to tell. We have a couple of stories written and produced by people who lost people in the killings of the club. So it's a really powerful book. But it's a sad book, but it's not a depressing book. I want people to know that the emotion in it is really powerful, but it's a book of acknowledging the sadness and the loss, but celebrating love in all its forms. And it's really, I couldn't be prouder to be a part of this book, because seeing all these disparate people come together in these divisive times and unify and just volunteer. People sought me out after I posted about wanting to do this. People really, really were impacted by this, and it really comes off the page. I was joking today with the people over at DC that we should sell boxes of Love is Love Kleenex with the book, because the book is really a really cathartic, emotional, inspirational, beautiful, haunting book. And there's some really fun stuff in it too. I mean, Taran Killam wrote from Saturday Night Live, who I did the book The Illegitimates with a couple of years ago, wrote a really, really great piece that I'm not going to describe or even tell. But when you read it, it's very much like a breath mint after a garlic dinner. It's fresh and it's comedic, but not disrespectful, and just smart. And it's just, like I said, it's just an embarrassment of riches. This book is just, it defies description. It's just really an amazing piece that I really hope everybody gets. And we got some names that we'll be announcing up until the 21st, that a couple of them are going to blow people's minds. I know people say they're going to split the internet in half all the time, but there's a couple people who contributed and allowed us to use things that are going to be mind-boggling. And in addition to them, those announcements, the book is going to sell out. It's a great book. It's a book that's worth $10 if it wasn't for charity, just for the collection of talent. And because the book is charitable and a great book, I think it's going to be a really sought-after piece.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's, again, when we're looking at a time when we're not exactly sure how the incoming government that takes over in 2017 will react to these kinds of things, it's good to know that the community is still willing to stand up and stand.
No, I actually think we do know how the government's going to react. I think every day he appoints Flat Top or the Brow or or
Tracy
the Penguin,
villains, yeah.
or Marsha, Queen of Diamonds, is the Secretary of the Interior. I think we know exactly where this is going.
Yeah, but again, that's the strength of the community in the face of that. But go on, please.
Oh no, I mean it's great. I just saw today that if Petraeus becomes the Secretary of State, he'll have to report that to his parole officer.
Yeah.
That's a sentence that should never happen. Steve Bannon, who likes the KKK. This is our first president in the modern age who's endorsed by the KKK, Kim Jong-un, and Vladimir Putin, and no major newspapers in the country.
I hear you, man. No, I spent Thanksgiving explaining Breitbart.com because they only know him through Breitbart and Steve Bannon through recent events. And I was explaining to them, no, they have been not only attacking liberals, but more importantly, the geek culture in such weird ways. And,
and their misogyny and their racism and the sense of just, Steve Bannon looks like Baron Harkonnen from Dune. but with worse skin.
Well, and truly, I mean, a mutual friend of ours attacked by Breitbart, Bendis, for Miles Morales as some sort of Obama plot. And you know him much better than I do, but I know Brian, and it's like, no, I don't think so. That's not where Miles Morales came from. But if you read Breitbart.com and believed it, that's the kind of propaganda, again, beyond politics. They're attacking geek culture in a very stupid way.
Here's a joke for the young kids in the audience, meaning a joke for us old men. Breitbart what its original name of it was?
No.
Pravda.
Of course. The Russian propaganda newspaper. No, that's the thing. Literally propagandists, and it sounds shrill and unbalanced to an uninformed person when you hear liberals talking about this. But no, there's a track record on the internet. Put Marvel Comics at Breitbart.com.
I'll say this. The thing that's the craziest about this whole thing is that the incidence of hate crimes went up 75% in the week after he was elected.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's got a 10-year-old daughter, and his daughter's best friend is Muslim, and they were walking to school the day after the election, and guys in a car threw rocks at these two 10-year-old girls. This is not the country I want to live in.
I hear you.
It's ironic that these guys who claim they are patriots and Americans are leaning towards Nazis. Some comedian tweeted he wants to go back in time and bring all the grandfathers of these people, the people that fought in World War II, back today to fight their grandchildren. Because the idea that American patriotism is about isolationism and misogyny and homophobia and anti-Semitism and people hailing, and we have a man who's going to be the most powerful person on the planet who has not only not denounced it, but not come out and said, this is ridiculous. He just he's defying the Electoral College to do what the Electoral College was designed to do, to prevent a demagogue from coming in. And I really don't think he wants the job.
Yeah, I'm confused. I understand, and it is very weird, and it's unfortunately, you've got a vice president who's been very clear on his views of the gay community as well.
Well, trust me, I'm waiting for that coming out story. I'm waiting. No one hates gay people that much that isn't a self-loathing monster.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just bad writing at this point. The ultra-conservative, homophobic Republican who's gay. It's just like it's such a stock character at this time. You can't even. It's the equivalent of the dial having someone say we're not in Kansas anymore. It's something that doesn't ever need to be done ever again because it's so boring at this point.
Yeah. Well, and I told you it's sad because you mentioned the grandparents of some of these young people and stuff. My father was a World War II vet, and he was, as I told you off the air, a Reagan and Nixon Republican. And yet, when he got to know, he was a restaurant owner and had a gay couple as customers, guys that hung. It was a bar as well as a restaurant. They hung out at the bar. They were good guys, and they were dating when my dad first met him. They ended up getting married. My father saw the photos of their wedding, and it was really, I was very proud of him because he had a very natural reaction of, wow, it was just like in his words, it was just like a regular wedding. I'm like, well, yeah, Dad. And but he was like, he was fascinated by it, but in a very positive way of, they're good guys and they're not hurting my life and they're great guys. And he goes, it was very eye-opening. And he goes, Good for them. I'm glad they found each other, and I was really proud of my Reagan Republican father.
That's the thing. Most people don't care what other people do,
Yep.
as long as you're happy and not impinging on their rights. And the thing is, too, once, we talked about this a little off the air, but once you meet someone who's in a minority group or a stereotype, the stereotype has to dissolve, or you're just a monster.
Yeah.
Because once you meet a gay person or a Jewish person or a trans person or a black person, they're not your black friend or your gay friend. They're your friend who happens to be.
Yeah.
And that's important, dissolving these stereotypes. And I really do believe that if our education system hadn't been so thoroughly dismantled throughout the past 25 years, that none of this would be an issue. Because when people are uneducated, they're scared. And when they're scared, they look to blame someone. And, from a psychological profile standpoint, this all makes perfect sense, these behaviors. But we've got to provide the education. I, for one, want everyone to have free college and free health care, because the smarter and healthier everyone is around me, the less I have to do.
No, you're right.
It's not about being a good person and wanting everyone to reap the benefits of a good life. It's part of it's a little selfish. It's like if you're smarter and healthy, a rising tide raises all ships. I always joke that as I get older, I don't get smarter. It's just the water level in the pool gets lower. I'm staying the same. It's just, It's just the benchmarks are getting lower. So anyway, let's talk about comics.
Well, yeah, this is a $9.99 book. It comes out December 21st.
Yes, and I do recommend ordering it, calling your local comic book store as soon as you hear this, and special ordering it from them. And because the final order cutoff was last week, when, like I had mentioned earlier, some of the talent we're still going to announce is going to make it really sought after. And if you don't have access to a local comic book store, it's going to be available digitally. We're going to have some exclusive content digitally because we had to lock down a format before everybody turned in their contributions and embarrassment of riches. And there's going to be some big names that are going to be digital only. And you can also order it directly from idwpublishing.com. But I really do recommend it. I recommend buying multiple copies because it's a great gift. It's an emotionally rich book that is suitable for everyone except the very young, just because of some of the stuff it deals with. It's not explicit in language or graphic quality, but it is dealing with the fallout of a really horrible event. And little kids shouldn't have to worry about that stuff. But this is good for probably the ages of 10 or 11 up. And it's a collection of, like I said, some of the best talent in comics doing work that is raw and emotional and honest, and it's really an unprecedented collection.
When these kind of collections come out, too, given the brevity that it's a page or 2 pages in some cases, you get some really interesting experimental stuff that isn't, normally what you see as far as some of these writers and artists' output. And I think that can be very exciting as well.
It's amazing because for almost without fail, every single person that contributed said, God, this is so much harder than doing even a 5-page story, a 1-page or a 2. And, people said to me, some people said, well, whether it was a lot of my straight white male friends were like, I don't know what to write. I don't want to feel like I'm pandering, and I don't want to write something maudlin. I said, write something that you would want to show your kid about this. Don't overthink it. Just write from the heart. I said, I'll tell you if I think it's cheesy. I'll tell you if I think it's overwrought. I'll tell you if I think it feels false. But without question, every single one of these pieces, from the first draft to the final print, are virtually unchanged.
That's awesome.
Because the pieces were so real and so honest.
That's great, man. No, congratulations for spearheading this, and everyone else should jump on board on this. And I am happy to draw a line in the sand and be on a certain side of that line, because I think this does transcend politics. This is about people, and it's great to see the geek community respond in such a positive way. So yeah, I'm completely behind it.
Thank you so much. And one other thing I wanted to add, we're still working out the details, but probably at MegaCon next year in the end of May, which takes place in Orlando, we're going to do an auction of all the original art from the book.
That's auction. Great. Wow, what a great idea. Fantastic.
We're going to do a big event there. We're going to try and get as many of the contributors as possible to come. And we're going to do a gallery showing, hopefully. we're probably going to try and do a private showing initially for the people that were impacted by it to come see the art and be cathartic for them. And then we're going to do a live auction. We're working on the details, but you'll be able to bid anywhere from around the world. It'll be alive as well as you don't have to be in person in Orlando. And a lot of these pieces are fantastic. And a couple of the artists only do pieces digitally now. So if they didn't do pen and ink, we're going to have really high-res, high-quality prints that are going to be signed and numbered one of one. They're going to be unique prints of the work that was done digitally.
I hear you.
So it's going to be a really, really, really wonderful thing. And once again, I can't give enough thanks to DC and IDW for instantly offering everything they did, and for places like Archie and the Will Eisner estate and Jason Aaron. We have Southern Bastard story in here. And for places like, Marvel and Valiant, who allowed artists and writers who were exclusive to them to contribute to this book. So it really is a really sort of everybody coming together in their grief and hope and defiance to do something for the greater good. I really think this is going to make a huge impact on a lot of people's lives. And that's something that everyone involved, whether you buy the book or worked on the book, can be proud of, because every ounce of this goes to help people that need it.
Well done, man. Very, very cool. And you've always been an interesting writer and done great things. But I think, this is a big one. This is a very significant thing. And I know you said too that if this is what you're remembered for, that's fantastic. And I think it's a wonderful cause, and I'm glad you spearheaded it. So congratulations.
Yeah.
Rallying the troops.
The crazy thing about it is how it's resonated in the quote-unquote real world. The New York Times had the exclusive announcement of some of the talent about a month ago, and it was the most retweeted story on their website the day it was announced. The Guardian in London did a big article. We're in Oprah Magazine's Favorite Things Christmas issue as the awesome thing of the month.
Oh, that's great.
We've got, so it's really lovely to see the reach of this. So.
Yeah, man. No, like I said, man, in the face of this kind of government and everything, it's good that the community is standing up and taking care of things. And that's the important thing, is that the community does, help its brothers out and sisters. And this is great. Well done. Okay, another special holiday treat. I was able to go in studio at 4-Star Studios and sit down with Ryan Browne. And it's always good to do those live face-to-face interviews. I let Ryan just go because, as I said earlier, he's got curse words coming up from Image, and always happy to hear his takes on publishing through Image versus Kickstarter, where he's been successful in both places. And I think he has a lot of really information, really new and interesting information to share. So I hope you'll enjoy this portion of the conversation now with Ryan Browne on Word Balloon. Man, I just missed a good story from Ryan Browne because I'm here in 4-Star Studios, and we're sitting on the couch. We've done this before with Tim Seeley and Steve Seeley, but it's a nice casual conversation. I got time off, so I wanted to do something different instead of the usual Skype call or telephone call, and it's good to have Ryan Browne live to talk about curse words and many other things. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you, too. It's nice to do it face-to-face because I feel like we won't step over each other's words a lot, which I love doing, accidentally, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't bother me. I'm used to 25 years of radio and everything, doing it that way and never really feeling like it got in the way. So,
sure.
And even Skype, I'd rather not do a video Skype. Every time Brian Posehn, when he was doing Deadpool, he came on, and I used to live in this apartment that had no air conditioning, and it was really hot. It was July, and I'm about to do a Skype conversation with him, and I'm like, well, it's audio, it's fine. So I've got like boxers on, no shirt, sweating my ass off, and I call him up, and his Skype avatar is him naked from the waist up with his baby on his massive gut at the time. And he's like, "Hey, how you doing?" And I'm like, "Jesus, I was afraid for you to see me live." Yeah. And look at your avatar. I go, you have no shit. He's like, "Nah, I don't care. I'm married." So yeah, that's what I always think of when Skype calls and the anonymity of being able to just be a voice and now you're worried about every time I call, God forbid, what I'm probably not wearing.
Oh, I know. Well, I like your Brian Posehn because he sounded spooky. Your impression of him is like spooky Posehn. Yeah, I usually wear clothes.
God bless you.
Like most of my life, I spend wearing clothes. I like doing it.
I like wearing clothes.
Yeah, I
too.
like it.
And I have an apartment that has central air, so I'm much more clothed than I used to be. This is a rough time back about 10 years ago. But anyway, curse words. This transitions very nicely into curse words.
A lot of nudity in that book.
You and Chuck Sol. Is there nudity in curse words?
No, there's no nudity.
I was going to say none in the first issue. Give me the elevator pitch. It's a wizard in our modern world.
Yeah, it's basically a wizard appears in modern day New York City. He's super cool, super sweet, super smooth. Everyone loves him. He becomes very famous for doing basically magic for hire. But what the people don't know, is that he's actually an evil wizard in a good wizard disguise. And he was sent here by a demon to destroy our world. But when he got here, he was like into all the modern accoutrement and flushing toilets and television and flaming hot Cheetos. So he decided he was just going to live here and be awesome and get famous for doing magic and just live a sweet life. Unfortunately, the demon that sent him here doesn't appreciate that, so he sends other wizards after him to destroy our world. So he's a bad wizard pretending to be a good wizard who ends up having to save us from other bad wizards.
Yeah, reluctant hero, basically.
Yeah, pretty much.
Very cool. No, I think that's great, and obviously a great opportunity to make fun of celebrity, which, man, every year you think it can't get more outrageous. And, 2016 is just... 2016, what a shitty year on so many levels, but celebrity, definitely.
It was the worst. Yeah, what a terrible year. But it's one thing that Charles and I figured out was that so the wizard's name is Wizord. So it's just wizard with an O.
Clever.
Yeah, real good. Real good. What we realized is that he comes from this kind of crazy medieval fantasy world. And in that world, the only way that you're famous is by being evil, by conquering people, by killing people, by taking things. And when he gets to our world, he realizes that you can live an amazing lifestyle just by being sweet. Or looking good, or doing things for people, in rewards for rewards, so that he can live an amazing life. And that's like a huge contrast to where he comes from, where you have to blow everyone up so that you live in a castle.
Well, and you show him fulfilling some people's wishes, and obviously things don't go the way that maybe they thought they should. I'll leave it at that. The first issue comes out in January.
Yeah, first issue comes out in January. I mean, he's not a good person. So he's got this lean to everything that he does magic-wise that is a little suspect. He's really doing everything for himself at this point. He's kind of, that's where it started. It's like, why don't we do a book about a wizard who's a dick? And that's because we can do whatever we want with magic, and we wanted to make a comic that you could just take the visuals totally off the rails and do all the things that you can do in comics, because you have an unlimited visual effects budget, so you can just do whatever you want. So that was like the motivation for building this story. And
you're the right artist for it, because obviously God Hates Astronauts kind of has always been this left of center outrageous book, so you kind of start way left of center. You're off in the corner. And now I imagine with Charles's, the two of you collaborating, because you guys are really co-writing this. I mean, more so than a regular artist-writer collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, we developed the idea together. And Charles is unlike anyone that I've ever worked with. And the great part of working with him is that it's like a yes and experience for the entire thing. Like, what if this? Oh, and then what about this? And the ideas develop pretty organically with like a back and forth of us. And then as the person who's credited as the writer, he sits down and figures out more of a emotional like bend and consequences and motivations of the characters that are kind of build around it. So I'm used to just doing weirdo stuff and ideas for scenes and storytelling ideas. And then so he kind of builds the infrastructure and then writes the actual scripts. So I'm not writing any of the dialogue in it, but in terms of co-creating, we're spitballing back and forth all the time. Like, what if this happened? What if this happened? Well, what about this? And then he kind of makes adjustments to scripts, and so it's like a really fluid way to work, and it's great because my skill set is only is limited to what I can do, and Charles brings in so much amazing deep thought about story and about character that I could never ever come up with. So I really think that our skill sets complement each other really well, and that we work together like it's the best working situation I've ever had.
That's great, and obviously will only help strengthen your own writing skills and everything, and maybe start, obviously, with the influence of Charles, maybe you'll start rethinking your stuff in a different way.
Well, it makes me feel stupid.
No,
it's just like, boy, people actually think about, like, way in the future on when they're writing books. They don't just draw the next page and figure it out, which is all I do.
Is that true? I mean, obviously, in the case of Blast Furnace,
yeah,
it started off as kind of a challenge to yourself to just kind of do something that way. But was God Hates Astronauts really more like that instinctive?
Yeah, it was. I mean, the first volume, which was a webcomic, I was thinking ahead about 3 to 4 pages at the time, and I would do a page or two a week when it was a webcomic, and I just winged it. And there were a lot of happy accidents, which I've gotten pretty lucky with a lot of stuff I've written, that things connect well and have weight to them that I didn't really intend. So I'm starting to really push myself with thinking ahead, and the most recent run of God Hates Astronauts was I was planning 5 issues at a time. So, but then since I was the artist and the writer, I would change my mind all the time,
sure,
and just draw new things into the pages, and then have to like rework it. And I never had any scripts. I wouldn't write any dialogue until I had finished drawing the entire issue, and then I just figure out what people were saying.
Are you the kind of artist that thumbnails it first and then puts it on, or do you just do it?
I thumbnail the whole thing. That's where I technically am writing it. Like I write an outline of what should happen in the issue, and then I thumbnail the whole thing. I'm not a good reader, so I make my comics silent comics.
Okay.
So like it's really important to me that you can tell what's happening without any words.
Right. The art carries the story.
Yeah. So that's like a primary thing for me always, is that you can read the emotion and you can read the passage of time and the story beats without any words. And then I just figure out the words later.
That's cool. No, honestly, when I heard the collaboration between you and Charles, I'm like, this is very interesting because you do both come at stories from different ways. But once I heard the concept and actually read the first issue and stuff, it works great. And yeah, I think you really stretch Charles's imagination with your visuals, and obviously, Charles, it's a more conventional story. Like, and I mean, it's got its level of going crazy that you bring and everything, but there's a foundation of a more conventional story in this case.
Yeah, that's something that I really wanted to do, because basically, God Hates Astronauts was me doing everything that I ever wanted to do. It was a very selfish book in terms of I only drew what I wanted to draw, I only wrote about what I wanted to write about, and I did everything. That way to just make it as fun as possible for me.
Were there bad experiences that led to that in terms of, before you started it?
Well, I mean, work for hire, which is, the bulk of my career ends up being where you just follow a script and draw what they want you to draw. And, like in God Hates Astronauts, I decided I hated drawing cars, so I was never going to draw a car. So people are just floating around in a seated driving position on the street because I don't like driving cars. But when you work in comics, you usually have to be able to at least get close to drawing a little bit of everything. So God Hates Astronauts was like, I like drawing animal-headed people, and that's about it. So that's all I'm going to draw. So curse words challenges me, especially because it's in New York City, and that's the main stage of it. So I have to draw New York City, which is very detailed and needs a lot of reference to get it right and get it believable. So far, Google Maps Street View has been very helpful
That's cool.
for plotting locations.
I know you were just in New York for the Comic-Con, and back in October we were both there. And do you take notice now because of curse words in a way that you didn't before?
Oh yeah, and I think that in terms of an environment that's very heavy on specific detail, New York is at the top.
Oh yeah,
just the signage and. When there's scaffolding and when there's, just different storefronts that are, New York has especially like on Manhattan where we have to be for the convention every year, like those storefronts are extremely busy.
Oh, yeah.
And just faking that stuff only goes so far. So
now you hate cars, but I was going to say I always love their parking solution of those outside lots that have like girders and platforms, and it's almost just all hydraulic lift and not, no structure around it. We're used to, if it's like that, it most likely is going to be, something out of concrete or something like that. But they have got the bare skeleton of what they need. And all right, just park your car. We'll lift it up. It'll be 3 stories high, and it'll be waiting there suspended in the air for you until you get back.
Yeah, that sounds like my worst drawing nightmare. To have to draw one of those filled with cars. It's terrible.
Hopefully Charles is listening, and you won't put in a scene where they're out in a parking lot.
There. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's going to happen.
Jesus. Dude, as always, I give it up to you for your creator-owned stuff and your solution to finding a market, because you've been one of the most successful creator-owned guys that goes to crowdfunding for your stuff. And was able to really do it, from God Hates Astronauts on. And obviously, it helped building that webcomic audience and stuff. But is there any differences now as you go on to, are you planning another crowdfunding project soon? Or do you feel like you've managed to establish yourself enough now that you can do it through Image and other publishing platforms?
I am slowly planning another Kickstarter. It's a very different process than working with even a company like Image that's so hands off. Working with Image is fantastic. It's really, you get to do everything that you really want to do, and they just guide you through it, which is amazing. Like, we just turn in completed issues, and they've never even seen, a script or anything, sure. And it's just like, there you go.
No, and they trust you.
And they trust you, and it's fantastic. It's such an amazing resource for creator-owned, because you really get to do exactly what you want to do, which is amazing. But, you're still dealing with the quote-unquote direct market, and you still have to solicit things through previews, and then, Diamond takes their big chunk, and then, you have to convince stores to order it, and there's a lot of energy that you have to spend in that direction, whereas you use that same energy for a Kickstarter in a different direction in a truly direct market where you're selling directly to your fans, which, for each book you sell, you make more money, and your fans get to directly support you. And so you sell a lot fewer comics when you go through Kickstarter than when you would go through Image, but you'll make more money on each book you sell. And so usually, like, it kind of evens out, in terms of financial gain, I guess.
Okay.
But it's just a different process. It's what you have energy for. Like, do I want to spend my energy pitching and, putting together a pitch and trying to get it picked up, and then after it gets picked up, do all the scheduling and, because with Image, I'm doing all the design on the book as well, just like I would with a Kickstarter. Like, it's Charles and I, and then Michael Garland is working on colors, and
okay.
Chris Crank is lettering it. But
okay.
We're our own editors. We're putting everything together.
Production too.
Production, everything. I upload all the final print files to the server and all that. So it's the same thing that I would be doing if I produce a book with a Kickstarter. It's just with a Kickstarter, then I've got 30 days where I have to promote it, and then I have to fulfill it, which can be quite
months. Yeah.
Quite a nightmare depending on how you do it.
Sure, man.
So yeah, it's just a different way of doing things. If I could just work on Image books forever, that's great. And if I could just do Kickstarters forever and make a living, that's great too. So I'm hoping to continue to have like a little bit of both.
Sure.
And,
and I would imagine having an image book is, more direct market. Obviously, stores would be more likely to put it out there, so someone might stumble on your product in the direct market versus Kickstarter, which is obviously an established market that you've been able to grow, and you're going to your fans. Are there many, again, I guess Blast Furnace was the last, I don't know what the last Kickstarter was for you, because you've also done a couple different versions for both God Hates Astronauts and Blast Furnace.
Yeah, that was Blast Furnace, the full color edition was the last one I did.
Okay.
And it was the smoothest one I did, but it still had tons of problems and stress and lots of hours put in that I wasn't making comics, but I was worrying about figuring out all the logistics. And I had my friend owns a UPS store, so he did most of the fulfillment on it. So it was
that's great.
Yeah, I'm really kind of figuring out how to do it, but now I'm sitting on tons of books that I have to slowly sell at comic shows and on my online store and stuff. So you have to house those and
right.
Right. Like there's a whole different set of things you have to think about with Kickstarter versus doing an image book.
Sure.
Like they both have difficulties and they both have great advantages. So
yeah, unless if you don't have the space in your house or your apartment, obviously you're renting a warehouse space to keep your inventory.
Right.
But then again, you've got something too that you can physically sell at shows beyond sketches and stuff like that,
sure.
Which obviously might, hey, great, I can have a nicer dinner tonight at the convention. Doesn't have to be Subway. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
No, as I'm sure a lot of people who are listening and stuff, these are the things they have to think about when they do a crowdfunder. And God, I mean, I've seen those sad horror stories of the people who get overwhelmed and don't realize how much is involved.
Yeah.
So, and I can appreciate that, and it always keeps me gun shy about possibly doing crowdfunding with some of the things I'm planning to do. But that's cool. Well, I'll be curious, and really, I'm glad you're in this kind of position. And again, I'm always, I think it's really great the way things. You cultivated these great relationships with established creators, worked on their books, got to be known through these kind of relationships, whether it was Bedlam with Spencer, and I'm trying to think of some of the other things, Manhattan Projects, right, with Hickman. I mean, that's great. So people kind of, you kind of guessed, you pitch in and fill in for a couple of issues. I hope I didn't spit on you just then.
No, it's fine.
Good. I just noticed. But now you pitch in and, suddenly more people become aware of your stuff. And really, I just think organically you were able to grow this audience in a way that I'm not aware of other people doing. I'm sure some have.
Yeah.
But again,
I think people have. I mean, it's going to art school and wanting to do comics professionally. I always wondered how I'd break in, or if I would,
Sure.
And it took me forever. Like it took me a really, really long time, which my frustration and not being able to get any work is why I started doing it all myself. So that kind of came out of necessity. But I also realized that when I was doing it for myself, I was making better work. And I think that's still the case to this day. It's kind of frustrating to me that when I work on freelance work for hire stuff, I just don't think it's as good. Like the art is not as good. The drawings are not as, I'm not having as much fun. And I am really bad at faking it.
Is it the impending deadline? I mean, because that's another thing when you're working for someone else and it is a scheduled monthly book. Mm-hmm. Sometimes maybe your final version that you need to turn in before the deadline isn't up to your level of satisfaction.
No, I don't think it is. I'm pretty fast, and I like to work a lot. Okay. So I've never had problems with deadlines from that standpoint.
Okay.
I just think that stuff is stiff and labored when I'm not really into it.
Because you're not emotionally invested in it as much as if it was your own idea.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. All right, I can see that. That's fair. Have there been other publishers beyond Image, and Image is its own thing, that have come to you with at least a little more hands-off approach and come to you and said, hey, if you want to do a book with us, since your success?
Well, after God Hates Astronauts was when I did the hardcover Kickstarter that did really well. I heard from pretty much every company that had rejected it that they were interested in
something else,
doing more God Hates Astronauts.
Oh, specifically
yes,
more.
yeah.
Well, sure, and it's obviously a hit. So.
And I chose Image just because I knew how hands off they were. Because I was like, well, I've never written a script for anything I've done, and the idea of having to work with an editor sounds like it would kind of change the process, and it would be a lot more work for me. And I wasn't sure how nervous I'd be working with an editor, So that's why I chose Image. I mean, I don't really try to get work
Sequels
with
out,
anymore, because the Kickstarter, like with the last Kickstarter, I intentionally did a smaller Kickstarter, and I think the next one I do will try and be even smaller, with the idea of it creating a lot less stress and a lot less work on the back end. And a lot less work on the front end, like doing Kickstarters for smaller books.
I was going to say, okay, so literally I don't even know how many, maybe 96 pages, maybe, even less, a novella.
Less than that. Yeah, I'm thinking about a 50-page book.
Okay. Interesting.
And and then I've even thought about doing single issues, like a 32-page book, and just doing them in a series. And a lot of people have done that kind of stuff. But the build-up and the stress and the work ahead of time, and like with God Hates Astronauts, when I did that hardcover, that was 6 years of work off and on that I was putting out there in one collection, and so it was extremely stressful if it didn't work out, because this was everything, and if I didn't hit the right press and people didn't find out about it, then that was just going to be it. And so then with Blast Furnace, I basically, I came on this show and I went on a couple other podcasts, that friends have, but I didn't really try to beat everyone into paying attention, just because, I could hit my goal and be okay with that. And, every book you sell on Kickstarter, that's more work for you to do and more cost. So I just decided that I would just kind of take it easy. And I think that that's a better way to go about it. It just... Because the stress level, you're really putting yourself out there. And then the crowdfunding, a lot of people don't really understand the mechanics of it. And so they think that you're getting rich, or, the money they think is,
all profit.
It's transparent, right? They can see how much money you're making on your book. But they don't really know, because every sale is cost, a unit and shipping and your time, and so every sale is more work. And so the place that I think you can really make money on a Kickstarter is having your print run paid for and then selling the books at shows. So that's kind of my idea on a Kickstarter. Yeah, that's kind of my idea is just have more books out there to sell directly to people, and make money off the books that way, instead of having to hope for a lot of store orders and hope for a ton of orders through a Kickstarter. You want enough, obviously, to hit your goal, and hopefully make a little bit of money through the process. But I think that it's more important to build up a catalog of stuff that you can be selling directly to people, and just kind of funding your life so that you can keep doing it.
Yeah, no, and building a library, and
sure, yeah,
no, that's great, honestly, and it's. I've heard you explain that to other creators at shows, and I'm always like, this is great, and I really think that's a very important component to people who are creating this and considering how they want to go about it, where they want to set their goals in terms of how much money they want to raise to pay for everything, and also, again, have this product that they can sell later and eventually develop this library idea. I think that's great. Mm-hmm. I've seen Remender do it. I've seen Bendis do it. That's the thing. A lot of their early stuff didn't sell that well, but luckily they hung on to it and everything, and through their later success have been able to go back and put out second printings of, God, in Bendis' case, this is stuff that's 20 years old.
Yeah.
And it's still selling because it's Bendis. It's early Bendis. Early Ryan Browne.
Yeah. Well, yeah, some of my early self-published stuff, early issues of God Hates Astronauts, I've sold for like $600 on eBay, and other people have sold for that much on eBay.
That's awesome.
And it's just like a crazy thing, because it was all books that I couldn't give away. Most of those books ended up in garbage cans.
Yeah.
I'm sure of it. which is a really strange, like, I don't know, validation. I don't know.
I understand
it's a really nice thing. And yeah, I mean, the thing is that coming from self-publishing has prepared me to be able to do all the little things in producing a comic. And so when I know people that are trying to get books done through publishers, try and encourage them to either get something from the publisher in advance or something, or just do it themselves. Because there's so much more you can gain. Because when you're working with a publisher, the publisher has risk involved, right? But when you do a Kickstarter, the risk is all yours. But that means the reward is higher. And if you take that risk on, you can actually do pretty well for yourself. So it's just a different way of thinking about things. Because like when I was coming up and trying to get work, certainly there wasn't, the internet wasn't as, there wasn't crowdfunding and there wasn't a way. And so all you did was hope and pray a publisher liked it. Like that was the only real way that felt significant was, it's whatever deal you would possibly give me, even if I make no money, as long as it's in a store, as long as it's published. And I think a lot of people still have that idea that I just need it to be published and in a store, which is, it's like a romantic idea. It's something you grow up wanting to have your books in stores. But you can take a different spin on it, and you can try and make a living making comics and selling to far fewer people, but just making more in each one you sell because you're selling it directly to them. And so, unfortunately, Kickstarter has enough horror stories for creators that it really has not become the alternative that I wish it was. I think it's become a big alternative for people that make games and technology stuff. And there's still webcomics that do pretty well on it, but in terms of people that make print comics, it really has slowed down considerably in terms of, I think people are just have become so scared of it over time.
With new people trying it versus, I mean, you're kind of established and you've got your core audience and everything. Are you saying for newer kind of initiatives?
Well, I mean, like if I were starting over, what I would do, and I think it's a pretty safe model, is that you launch your book as a webcomic for free. You give it out to everybody. You send it around. Maybe you print some, small copies and get tables at shows and promote it that way. Maybe you make some merchandise. And then after you get 40, 50 pages up there, then you launch Kickstarter and just do it very, very small and do everything right and fulfill everything on time. And, I feel like if your product's good and you need to raise $5,000 to do like a single issue Kickstarter, like you can do that even if you don't have much of a name. And I would think that would be much more rewarding than trying to get it picked up by a publisher, which is very hard to do.
No, and especially $5,000 for a single issue. That's a nice achievement and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I wanted to do a new book and Image wasn't interested, then that's what I would do. I'd make a webcomic, I'd put it up, update it regularly, promote it, and then hopefully get a following, and then do a small Kickstarter for it, and then do another small Kickstarter, another.
Publishing the same, obviously, what you put up for free, and
all of that.
To offer it as a. I mean, what's the appeal then? For that, if someone's read it, as the webcomic people.
People like physical stuff.
Okay,
they really do, and especially if it's good. Some of the most successful Kickstarters have been webcomics, and a lot of it is because the people that back Kickstarters they get their comics through the internet, and Kickstarters through the internet.
Sure. So
it's just like you read this every day. Well, give us $20 and you can have this print collection of it by clicking two more buttons, from the webcomic. And I think that's a really natural progression. I heard many times from people that have bought my books on Kickstarter that they don't go to a comic shop and they don't buy monthly comics. So, they just they read the comics online and stuff and buy some things on Amazon maybe. But your audience is already an audience that exists online. Like, it's really hard to go to comic shops and leave flyers and be like, hey, can you guys, when you go home, can you get online and back my Kickstarter? Like, that's not a super practical way to promote it. Versus, here it is, why don't you read 40 pages if you like this? Here you can buy a print version of it and help support it. Which I think a lot of people will. I mean, you'll get tons of people that won't, but with a Kickstarter, because the money is so direct and there aren't a lot of people taking chunks out of it, you can sell a lot fewer and still have a success. Like with my last Kickstarter, I sold 830 copies of the book through it, and I made an okay amount, and I got to print my book. If I had sold 830 copies of it through the direct market, I would have been in trouble.
Sure.
Like, really in trouble. I wouldn't have made anything.
Right.
So,
no, that's great. I'm going to put our conversation on with the panel that you did in Cincinnati with Jim Rugg and the others and everyone. And I think it's a good way to kind of, so when you're done listening to this interview, stick around for the panel, because you're not only going to hear from Ryan, but you're also going to hear from Jim Rugg and Sarah Dyer and Alexis Zirit from I love his book Space Riders, which is so ridiculous, and Kyle Starks.
Who does a very similar thing. Kyle Starks does the same. He's got image books and Kickstarter books at the same time. He's operating in that same realm of humor books that aren't super popular in stores for whatever reason, but have an audience online. I still don't know why that is.
It's because a lot of stores are really more the owner's taste versus the customer's taste.
Sure.
And also, man, that profit margin is so razor thin. Mm-hmm. And God, even somebody successful like Brian Hibbs out in San Francisco was kind of talking out loud this past week online. I think it was on Heidi's website. Where she was, Heidi McDonald, where Publishers Weekly's comic blog, and just talking about how, just trying to rent a storefront in San Francisco, and how, if you're an independent business, it's kind of impossible to keep up with the escalating, real estate rates. But also, idiosyncratically, if I don't like humor books, I'm not going to carry them in my store unless, there's some guys that kind of operate to their own detriment and don't really listen to their thing. But, how many of those 3,000 stores across the country are just safe, DC and Marvel, whatever they're putting out, and, maybe a little bit of Image, maybe. Sure. That we're lucky, was it like that in Detroit? In terms of, I was going to say we're lucky in Chicago, New York, and the bigger cities where there are so many stores. And you really can, from Quimby's to Chicago Comics to Challengers, to comics that caters to a kids,
sure.
primarily to a kids market, but still has everything. Yeah. That's smart. And, you really do listen to your audience, or you cultivate a specific vibe. And I don't know, humor, I don't know why people don't think of it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Long answer.
Yeah, well, you have to think about it in terms of a store. There are certain stores that are really nerdy about comics and seeing new things, and then there are other stores that are nerdy about comics in a different way, and that they love comics, but they love what they love, right? So right. I'd rather order 3 more copies of a Batman title than 3 copies of this humor book that might not sell and would be a loss.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which makes total sense. That's how our market is bizarrely structured, and it makes total sense. That's risk for a store. To try anything new, it's a risk. And it's a safe bet to try what they know sells. Like, known creators and known properties is much safer for a store. Especially if a store doesn't have much money to play with, which most stores don't. So yeah, that's another reason why I can sell directly to my readers. Whereas when I'm working on a book for Image, like Curse Words, I realize the connection that people have with their store owners is usually very strong. And if a store backs something and says to the customers, read this, that is your best ally in this fight. Absolutely. Like, more than a super fan who buys all my books, going to the store and pre-ordering it. If I get a store owner to like it, because, we've all been going to comic stores our entire life. You go in on Wednesday, what's new? They have like a book they'll have up on the counter maybe that this is the recommended reading, and you buy it because you trust them. And that's like a wonderful thing about comic stores. And that the store owners who are active and read things and try things out, they can sell whatever they want, it seems, by just having that good connection with their readers. So if they want to buy, I don't know, like Jim Rugg's Street Angel, you want to get a Street Angel collection, maybe not a lot of people know about it, it's a great comic. If you have a good connection with your fan base, you could order 20 copies, and then when everyone comes in, you say, you should check this out, it's awesome. And then that's great for Jim.
Absolutely, yeah. No, and also great for the store. And again, they're tastemakers, and that's good. And no, you're right about that. I think people do kind of trust. It's like, trust your doctor, trust your comic book retailer. Yeah. Usually, yeah. No, and you do. You go into their store because you like their taste.
Yeah.
So I think you're right about that. Definitely, man. All right, let's stick around now, because I know one thing that I have to thank you for is the 2016, amidst all the hell freezes over terrible things that have happened this year, the one good thing, especially for me, is being a Cub fan, that the Cubs did win the World Series. And it was very funny because you and I were coming back from the New York Con, and I was telling you that I hadn't been watching the early rounds of the playoffs because I really was like, if I watch, they'll lose. And you'll have to forgive me because obviously, and the Tigers have had their stretches of tough years as well. But yeah, I was just like, just teased by 2003 and the 80s, twice in the 80s, once in the 90s, and just the failures of the early 2000s. And really, just even letting myself, they got Lou Piniella, man. He's a hell of a manager. They had him in the early 2000s. But yeah, I was kind of paying attention this year, and I'm like, something, win, and I'll probably check in, if they make it to the championship series, the league series for the pennant. Mm. But no, I'm really glad, because then I did start watching with the Giants, and you convinced me.
Did you do what I said in terms of the DVR? Because really, you just pause it for 10 minutes, and that it's already happened. So you watching it has nothing to do with it.
That's true, but also I could get all the crappy, when nothing happens and it's 3 up, 3 down innings, and just buzz through those, or a really long at bat,
sure,
which looks just as satisfying on fast forward for me than it does, for the 5 minutes that the guy's really, man, he's really digging in. Yeah. He's really, man, you gotta. I mean, I don't know how play-by-play guys. I come from sports radio, and I used to tell guys like Hawk Harrelson and stuff, when you're stuck in that situation, I don't know how you just keep coming up with stuff to talk about. And Shaky, do it for that long, I'll tell you. Comes natural, and he's like, you always got stats, you always got things to talk about, and that's why the beauty of the great Hawk Harrelson, I love that guy.
He's always got stuff to say.
He's funny. He's a good guy. I like him. He's always been very nice to me. Yeah. And in your town, I told you one guy who I loved was Ernie Harwell.
Oh, absolutely.
He could not. What a sweet man. Yeah. I mean, truly.
Well, baseball is the conversational sport. Right, it's slow and deliberate at times, and exciting at other times. But its history is so important, and storytelling is so important, and that more than any sport, it really matters who the broadcasters are.
Yes.
It's super important. And, you can like the personalities in other sports, but in baseball, there are long times where you have to hang out with these people like they're your friends.
Well, yeah, it's a 4-hour, especially now, it's a 4-hour game. Yeah, man.
Yeah, and that's why radio works so well for baseball as well. My life is a lot better during baseball season. That's very obvious to me. Because baseball, there's games on all the time, and it's a perfect thing to work to,
Sure.
Because I listen on the radio almost always, and I'm just hanging out with some people while I'm drawing, and it's really a fantastic thing to be into. And it's also weird being an artist who's into sports, because you grow up being the nerd that everyone makes fun of, and then you think you're in a safe zone as an adult, and then in your nerd community, everyone makes fun of you for liking sports. I know.
The tables turn. You're right.
You can't win, man. You can't win.
Is that a sports thing?
It's like, sports. And I'm like, yeah, I know. It is stupid. I understand. It's just competition. I don't know.
No, it's fun. Yeah. Competition is fun, and hey man, believe me, I've suffered enough losing Chicago seasons, and also having to do it as my profession for 16 years. It was nice, as I told you. That's another reason why it's nice to check out and just, if I feel like watching a game, I watch a game or I listen to a game, and I don't worry about where they are in the standings. And it's just, are you going to win today?
Yeah.
If you can win today, that's great. And if you don't, that's okay too. And I can appreciate just the single competition. But no, I can't deny that the Cubs were great. Although everything you said that's nice about the storytelling of sportscasting and stuff, I got to tell you, and maybe this is old man me, kind of showing just the level of broadcasters. Isn't it ironic that the Cubs help the Dodgers out the door, and unfortunately, give Vin Scully a losing, ultimately a tougher season to go through than obviously if they had won the championship.
Sure.
And I saw those hashtags too, win for Vin.
Yeah,
and it's like, back, and I love Vin Scully. I love Vin Scully, and also we're lucky because the Major League Network on cable will run Vin Scully play-by-play, and I know that the Dodgers have some sort of weird cable deal, as some big cities do, where, no, it's really like you can't, unless you live in a certain area or are willing to pay a really lot of money, you can't watch the games. Yeah. You have to go to the games or listen to the radio to get them and everything.
Right.
So luckily they were giving us that posh feed. So invariably a late game was going to be a Dodger game and a Vin Scully game. So it was nice this year hearing Vin. He still got it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's crazy that he still has it. It is 67 years in broadcasting.
Jesus. Goes back to literally when the Dodgers were in Brooklyn.
We're in Brooklyn.
I can tell you about Ebbets Field because he was there.
See, that stuff's so fascinating to me.
I agree.
I love American history, and I love stats, and I just love the drama of the game. Like, those are all things that I really feed off of, and I the older I get, the more I love it. The more into it I am.
No, I understand.
And it's like, if I could do it all over again, I would be in some sort of office for some baseball team in some capacity.
Well, and I always say if I were to ever go back to sports radio, I'd like to do sports documentary. I wouldn't want to do the day-to-day game stuff because it's a grind. It also every season does kind of after a while feel like the same season, except for those incredible magic moments that sometimes only happen once in 20 years, let alone 10 years.
Yeah, and it's a little bit of a life lesson being such an intense sports fan because you care about all these people that really you have nothing to do with and maybe you wouldn't even get along with in real life. But every single season, except for one team, ends in really upsetting defeat.
Yeah.
And that's, like, I've watched... Like, the Tigers won the World Series in '84, and I was too young to remember that.
Okay.
So I watched my team lose in the World Series twice. Never seen them win. And yet I still get excited every year. And then every year I get really pissed off and wonder why I care so much about this stuff. It's a really amazingly strange thing.
Well, and I also think, unfortunately, again, I go back to when athletes were only making, $50,000 was a great year, and they had to have off-season jobs.
Yeah.
And I came in at the tail end of that. I knew baseball players who worked at banks and hardware stores and things like that, or just had jobs in the community. And like you were saying, I think that's the unfortunate thing now as I get older is there is a more of an impersonal relationship. And, and I've said this to you before, from personal seat licenses to the high-paid, player that is, God, look at LeBron. That's the thing, and it's so funny. I was part of the Jordan era. I saw him start and retire, and then obviously he did come back later with the the Wizards. Showing my age.
Yeah, sure.
The Washington Bullets. But no, can you
imagine? Can you believe they were ever called the Bullets?
It was again. Hey, man, we used to play Army in the streets, so really, it does. But at different times, man.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's again LeBron. Cleveland loves him, but of course he's happy to go to Miami, and then they welcome him back, and of course they'll welcome him back. Sure. But I don't know. There's part of me that I'm like, I don't know. I'm not as forgiving or Like I said, I mean, I really appreciated this Cub team from the World Series and stuff, or this entire year. And it was fun to watch them play because they really did play as a team. That was the other great thing, was you really felt like it was a legitimate team effort and everything. It was really Jordan and Pippen and then the role players of the Bulls.
That's basketball. That's the difference between basketball and baseball, is that you can have three great players and then your team is amazing.
Yep.
Whereas that you can have the Cy Young winner and your team finishes in last place.
Yeah, man. Absolutely.
So the dynamic, all the moving pieces is so fascinating to me. And the Cubs that Theo Epstein was drafting off of character as well as ability. And that's why there are so many likable players that perform so well. And then obviously having Joe Madden, one of the most interesting men in the world, be your manager was very helpful.
He is the most interesting. I would agree with.
But it's funny. But then you stop and you realize that you're rooting for a uniform and a history, you know, and all these players could be replaced with other players, and then you have to root for players that you didn't like before, and now you do like them.
Well, and an organization that had a little bit more vested in its city, but they can easily, not only can an athlete leave, but an entire team could be like, hey, something, we're getting a better offer from, whatever, Scottsdale. Yeah. So we're going to move to Scottsdale now. Yeah. I mean, and just also the held for ransom. I mean, I love Real Sports, the HBO show, and man, you hear about some of these stadium deals now, and just the real funding behind him and stuff. And it's a much, I mean, it always was. I mean, we have rose-colored glasses, but I mean, going back to Charles Comiskey and the Black Sox scandal, I mean, there's always been corrupt business going on with sports teams and stuff, but it's just more blatant now. And again, this kind of indifference of, if a family can't afford to go to the ballpark, that's okay. We got executive boxes, corporate boxes that'll be held, be filled, and everything will be fine. Anyway, blah blah.
I see it as the same thing. Like being a diehard Tigers fan is like the same thing as being a diehard Batman fan. It's like they're creative teams that you don't like, but you still buy it and you still read it. You still go see the Batman Superman movie, even though you know what's going to happen. Like it's the same thing with rooting for a sports team. It's the same idea, except you're rooting for jocks who were probably mean to you in high school.
That's hilarious. That's awesome. All right, now now that it's the end of the year, I kind of want to do like what were the movies or TV or whatever pop culture was like really surprised you this year. What did you like and what didn't you like?
I don't think I liked anything.
Really?
Is that bad?
Stranger Things?
It was okay.
Oh,
it was
interesting.
really. I mean, the nostalgia hits really heavy, but I don't think that there was much to it beyond it, which I was really into it and really enjoying it. And then when there weren't really any surprises to the story or any really unique moves to it, it was so much nostalgia, and that seems to be like a big thing that people get really into now. And I get into it too. Like,
sure.
I was so excited for the last Star Wars movie, and I was smiling through the whole movie. And then afterwards, I was like, man, that really actually wasn't very good.
Oh, funny.
It just was very similar to all these things I love. And like the Stranger Things had the same appeal to me. Like, am I excited for season 2? Not really.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
But I liked the way it looked and sounded, and I liked little kids in danger, Goonie style. Like that's stuff that I.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, stuff that I love.
Goonie style, hilarious.
Yeah, watch Goonies after watching Stranger Things, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is pretty shameless.
That's very funny.
This is so shameless.
See, I was already in college I think I probably was in college or late teens when the Goonies came out, so I don't have that kid's kind of love for it.
There's even a Barb character in Goonies. It's like, oh my gosh.
Is that Martha Plimpton's friend?
With the glasses. And,
yeah.
I mean,
it's true.
just
that's hilarious.
Like, wow, this is the older brother, and it's crazy.
Well, that's true, and I mean, I felt that Lost Boys kind of feel to it as well.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, Lost Boys, and just that Steven Spielberg kind of little kids in serious danger kind of movies, that incredible adventures that the adults don't understand how serious these adventures are. It's that same idea.
Absolutely. No, that's fair.
I like Kaiju Max. That was my favorite thing
that's
of
awesome.
the year. I love Kaiju Max.
Excellent, man.
I wish everyone was reading it.
I hear you.
Man, that book is so smart.
Yeah, man. And now I'm blanking. Damn it, it's the Minnesota
Xander Cannon.
Yeah, Xander Cannon. Of course it is, man. No, I talked to him about that. Yeah, Kaiju Max is very cool. It's all it's the Japanese monsters in prison, basically. Yeah.
Uh-huh. It's great. I mean, the connections that he draws between prison media, like prison movies and prison TV shows, and then giant monster tropes is just constantly smart and fun.
That's very fun.
Constantly smart and fun. That book is my favorite comic I've read in a very long time.
That's awesome.
It's fun, and it's at times really heartbreaking, and like the art style he's using is decently cartoonish. And when they first launched, they had all these problems with backlash because people thought it was a kid's book. But it's a hard prison drama. It is for sure. Everything that you'll see in Oz, you see in
the HBO show Oz. Absolutely, man.
It's so genius. It's fantastic. That man, I loved it. Fargo season 2. That's the other thing that I loved. That was fantastic. That's my favorite TV show in a long time.
Excellent. No, I like it. Very good, man. Well, dude, congrats, and looking forward to Curse Words getting started. You guys were nice enough to give me the first issue. It looks great, and it comes out early January, mid-January?
January 18th.
Okay.
Which is, right before our world possibly changes a lot.
Yes, indeed. I know. Actually, I was proud of us. We managed to get through an interview and not talk about the impending doom.
Yeah. Well,
so
we'll see. The only thing you can do is be optimistic at this point. You just gotta hope.
Interesting times usually breeds interesting fiction and storytelling. And I certainly wish no ill on anyone, but then again, it's funny because Mark Miller actually made the point that the 90s, he's like, things kind of got a little flabby in the 90s because everything was kind of safe and we were living in a safer world and maybe people were kind of taking it easy or whatever. And it's like, well, the numbers kind of line up where he's not necessarily wrong. I mean, you had Preacher and you had a few exceptions, but there really was a lot of crap.
Yeah.
And, so now it is nice that we're all scared out of our minds and dancing as fast as we can to make something interesting.
Yeah. That's
the only byproduct. That's the only happy byproduct I can come up with.
I know. Well, let's hope. I'll just get lost in baseball again.
There you go. There you go, man. No, great seeing you, Ryan. Thanks a lot.
Cool. Thanks so much. It was fun.
There you go, Ryan Browne and Marc Andreyko. Happy to share those conversations with you on today's Word Balloon. More coming up before Christmas. I just have the stocking is full, and I want to share all the presents because great conversations that are time sensitive, and I want to get them out there while the holiday is still fresh. So I'll be looking for another Word Balloon very shortly this week. And I hope you enjoyed today's thing. Again, do us a favor and support Love is Love. It comes out next week. December 28th from your local comic stores and online from Comixology. And there are digital extras, as I said, and it sounds like a great anthology for a great cause. It's only $9.99. The proceeds go to support the victims and their survivors of the Orlando shootings. And I think it's a worthy cause, and I'm glad to support it with a commercial-free episode and maybe point your dollars that way to support this wonderful cause. Thanks again for listening to Word Balloon today, and as I said, more coming up, so stick around. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2016.